My name is Meghann Cuniff, and I'm a journalist. I'm a legal affairs journalist. Kind of developed that specialty over the last few years or so.
What was the first, I guess, pop culture trial that you covered? Because I know you've been doing this for a while.
Probably the first one that I covered mainstream wise was Vanessa Bryant's trial. When Vanessa Bryant, Kobe Bryant's wife, sued LA County. That was like the first celebrity aspect trial that I covered. And that was just back August 2022 for Law and Crime News. Because the trials that I covered in the years before that were like kind of law nerd type trials for trade publications. So the closest that I'd come to covering a celebrity trial was I covered the Mongols motorcycle gangs RICO trial, and Jesse the Body Ventura was a defense witness for the Mongols. So when Jesse the Body Ventura testified, there was actually a TMZ reporter in the courtroom. So that was like my first taste of celebrity trial stuff. But then I left the trade publications to go mainstream, and it was Vanessa Bryant who at one point she had Sierra and Monica both in the courtroom for her to show some support. So that was my first taste of like celebrity, the celebrity aspect of trials. But then Cardi B went on trial in Santa Ana, that silly case over her album art where the guy sued her and said that she'd improperly used a piece of her tattoo on the
Right.
album art. So that was like my first real foray into it. And then really it was like on after there because I was working at Law and Crime and they were all about the celebrity trials in LA. So we had like Weinstein, Masterson, and then Tory Lanez, of course.
Did you fall in love with hip hop court reporting specifically after Cardi B? What made you stay in hip hop court reporting after the Cardi B trial?
It was kind of just accidental covering hip hop trials. I mean, because Weinstein and Danny Masterson are very decisively not hip hop oriented. But then when Tory Lanez came up, it was just another case in the same courthouse as there. So really the hip hop aspect wasn't really what drew me to it. It was just like, hey, here's a celebrity trial with a ton of interest in it. So let's cover it. So after I developed this huge following on Twitter, I mean, I'm still kind of trying to figure out like how to use it all. It's like, do I just, and I'm kind of realizing I do just need to embrace the celebrity trial reporting, but I don't want to like commit myself to only hip hop reporting because there's so many other interesting celebrity cases come up, but there also is just like, it does seem like there's a lot of cases and a lot of interest in the hip hop world and beyond that I could kind of tap into.
Well, I think there's also been a lot of trials recently just in the hip hop space in general. And, you've kind of become Meghann the reporter, so to speak, because of your coverage of Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez trial.
Yeah.
That was obviously a huge moment for you as a reporter and as for the culture as a whole. What were your overall feelings during that time as to what was going on?
It was kind of overwhelming, but I also remind myself that it wasn't because I was so busy covering the trial. And I frankly had been so siloed in like the LA Daily Journal, law.com, no social media allowed. Well, law.com allowed social media, but the LA Daily Journal is kind of like a caricature of like an abusive old newsroom from the 70s where the boss is just like super curmudgeonly and he hates social media. And he would actually, like, if he saw me tweet from a courtroom, he would call and yell at me and be like, you work for the Daily Journal, not Twitter. So I wasn't completely up on all the social media stuff when I was at Law and Crime. And I really learned a lot about all that's out there from after the Lanes trial ended. And I was like, okay, I just got like 60,000 followers on Twitter. Like, where did that all happen? And I started like looking at all the different coverage and discovering all these different Instagram pages with like millions and millions of followers. And you're just kind of like, no wonder traditional media is dying.
Yeah.
Not only is traditional media dying, but outlets like these places are totally thriving. It's like, how do we find a way to like, how do I find a way to tap into that to like support traditional journalism?
Yeah. While you were watching the trial unfold, I guess more specifically, did you always think that Tory would be found guilty? What was kind of the temperature in the courtroom during your time there?
I wasn't completely sure because there's always the possibility of a hung jury, but I didn't think it looked good for him. And the first thing that I noticed, and I think I even tweeted early on, and it was one of the threads that didn't get a ton of attention, but I think I said something about how the prosecutors really did not seem worried about this case at all. because they didn't. It was the whole vibe in the courtroom. And I don't want to rag on Tory's attorney too much, because when you look at like the background of his whole falling out with Sean Hawley and the email that Sean Hawley sent him saying that she didn't like the Kelsey defense, which was the whole blame Megan's best friend for shooting her, you definitely can tell that George McDesian just kind of came in at the last minute to like do Tory a favor. But just the whole vibe in the courtroom was, it didn't seem very good for Tory at all, and it didn't seem like the jury was like buying it at all, and look what happened.
Yeah, look what happened. Tory allegedly used his final courtroom moment to call you a googly-eyed bitch and all this other nonsense. He may have also mocked you potentially in the teaser trailer for his new album. What's your take on all that? What was your take on Tory's insult when you heard about it?
At first, I just kind of thought, oh, is that what he said? Because I'd heard him saying something. I just couldn't totally hear it. And I mean, my first reaction was, okay, I totally believe it. And it just seems like so incredibly immature. I mean, it's like, do people think that I'm going to be bothered by this? And I kind of reminded myself, it's like the way everything works on social media and kind of the diss world that we're all in. It's like, I need to confirm that, like get that from another source than just some random Tory fan on the internet, get that confirmed and then tweet it out, because it's going to go everywhere. I was like, oh, that's going to go viral if I can confirm that. So I don't know. I think some people were thinking that I'd be like really upset about it or something. Tory Lanez insulted me.
Were you able to confirm it? Do you ever get that transcript?
Yeah. It was after the court went off the record. So when I emailed the court reporter, she said that she didn't have it on the record, but that she did hear something like that. And then, but I'd already confirmed it through the DA's office. I just figured I'd email the DAs and be like, hey, is this true? Did you hear that? And I think Alex Bott was like a little concerned that I was going to be like really upset about it, but he was like, yeah, I heard that. I definitely heard that from he said there's conflicting reports on whether he actually said my name, but it was definitely like googly-eyed bitch, and multiple like sheriff deputies heard it. It was like, oh wow, that's kind of hilarious and kind of fitting too. I mean, Alex Bott in his email said it's kind of fitting that the case started with misogyny and it ends with misogyny.
Yeah. Did you have any other interactions with Tory that the public maybe wasn't aware of?
Not really. I do remember the one time in trial that he kind of looked at me. I don't know if you remember, it was probably my favorite tweet from the trial, but when George McDesian had opened the door, as they say in trials, for the full interview with Kelsey to be played with the prosecutors, the one where she's like totally relaxed and calm and just tells them everything and completely implicates Tory as the shooter. When he opened the door for that entire thing to be played, I was reminded of something that happened in the trial of this Nebraska congressman who was convicted of lying to the FBI about some illegal fundraisers that he'd held. His lawyers had done the same thing where they'd like opened the door for this really incriminating phone call to be played again for the jury. So I was making that comparison in a tweet, and the Nebraska congressman Jeff Fortenberry is just like such a doofus. He has this like poofy gray hair and stuff. So I mean, a photo by photo comparison of Tory Lanez and Jeff Fortenberry was pretty hilarious. So that was the picture for the tweet. And I saw him in the cafeteria, like we were all leaving the cafeteria to go up to the courtroom after I had tweeted that, and he had just seen it, and he just kind of like gave me this look like, it's kind of hard to describe, but he was like kind of like smirking, laughing, and just looking at me like you know what you're fucking doing kind of thing. But I don't know. I saw it as being like, when you look at the photo comparison of Tory Lanez and Jeff Fortenberry, I don't think Tory Lanez is the weird looking one there, It's totally Jeff Fortenberry.
Were those insults, I guess, strangely validating at all to you as a reporter? Like, it seemed like you really bothered him.
Yeah, I mean, I was always just like, I wonder if he knows how much attention this is getting me, especially the first time when his team mentioned me on his Instagram stories and said, with all due respect, don't listen to anything Meghann Cuniff says. And he spelled my name wrong. But if you look at like my personal website, this just like a portfolio website I threw together, but it's meghanncuniff.com. So if you're Googling that name, it comes up pretty high in search engines. You can see the search results over the years, the visitors over the last year, and you just see this huge spike all of a sudden. It's like, hey, guess which day is the day that Tory named me on Instagram? Because I think so many people saw it and were just like, who? I mean, it all he really does is just like increase my profile when he does that. It's interesting.
Yeah. Pivoting off that, I guess you also are currently covering ASAP Rocky's trial, and you noted that he came up to you and shook your hand and praised your work. How does it feel getting that type of recognition, both from the public now and from these hip hop stars?
It's cool. It's cool. I mean, we always like hope for that. And I kind of remind myself that it's easy to focus on the haters, but when you have way more fans than haters, you should try to focus on the fans too. And part of it is, you know, growing up in like traditional newspapers, you don't want to make yourself part of the story and you want to be kind of humble. But, you know, especially in the social media era, you know, self-promotion is a big thing. And you just kind of remind yourself that it's okay to like embrace that and you know, focus on the good, because that's kind of why we got into it. And you know, the hip hop stars, I mean, like anyone else, it's like, oh wow, that means Rihanna might know who I am. But you
Yeah.
know, you don't want to get clouded by that too, because it's like, well, it's a first degree assault case. And I certainly appreciate the fact that both he and his lawyer Joe Tacopino are polite and nice to like not only me but the other reporters. But it's like, it's not really going to matter in front of the jury. But you know, I don't want to say it doesn't matter overall, because you know, we, especially in the day and age of like all the attacks on the press and you know, Trump holding like death threat rallies for journalists, it's nice when, you know, to have, especially Tacopino, who represents Trump, like he understands how to play the game. He was talking to reporters afterward, he's like, I know you're all just doing your jobs. Like he was being really nice to us, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, that must be a nice change of pace just from the situation with Tory. I guess going off that, what's your take on Rocky's current situation? Where do you see this heading?
It'll be interesting to see when his trial actually gets scheduled and how soon he actually goes to trial. Because just watching the preliminary hearing and looking at those videos, I was like, God, if I was in his camp, I would be sounding the alarm right now. But I mean, sounding the alarm, it's like, what's he supposed to do? I mean, I doubt the prosecutors, if he just wanted to plead guilty, the prosecutors aren't going to be like, okay, well, we'll just make it so you can plead guilty and not face any consequences for this violent crime you're pleading guilty to. I mean, they'd probably want him to go to prison for that. And he doesn't want to go to prison. And it sounds like they think there's enough stuff in the case that they can work with you know, the knuckle injury is not exactly a bullet wound, it's a graze. But I just am concerned for what the law is actually going to say about whether the extent of his injury actually matters when you're convicting him of first degree assault or not. But I was just looking at the facts of it and just thinking that it does look like an uphill battle for like a defense at a jury trial, but they've got a long time to prepare. And I think I think we could be seeing more stuff. Tacopina seemed really confident, but he also kind of had a Trumpian tone to the whole thing that was like, is this guy just blowing smoke, or does he actually have something that's like going to lead to the complete exoneration of ASAP Rocky? I guess we'll find out.
Were you surprised at all? Because it felt, at least from the outside, it was kind of a surprise development. I feel like a lot of people didn't expect Rocky's situation would go to trial.
Yeah, I mean, I even said actually when I did an interview with Adam from No Jumper, I mean, I'm glad I prefaced the whole thing by just saying I didn't really know that much about the case, because I mean, all we'd really heard about it was just the indictment. But I told him that I was always skeptical about whether it was actually going to go to trial. And it seemed like, you know, all this Father of the Year campaign stuff that Rocky was on, it has to be part of like a behind the scenes effort to lobby the DA's office to get some kind of plea deal for him. But it sounds like that wasn't going on at all. So I think the preliminary hearing, yeah, I think that was a big wake up call for probably a lot of people in the hip hop industry and maybe some people in his camp, that just like, this isn't going away. Because he was really, you know, nice. I mean, he was nice and friendly the whole time, but he seemed really jovial in the beginning. And he seemed to have a little bit of a different tone when he was walking out of the courtroom after she'd ruled there was probable cause, which I think that was just a given. I mean, I think she kind of rules that way with everyone, but just seeing the video up there was just like, oh God, jury's going to see that, you know, you're going to take this to trial. I guess we'll see how it goes.
You've covered a lot of other rap trials that I really want to touch on, especially the YSL trial that I feel like we need to discuss a lot, because that's definitely been a very bizarre ride so far. But I want to touch briefly on the sexual assault allegations that are growing against Diddy, and I guess you can say other members of the hip hop community. What are your thoughts on Diddy's situation, and have you heard any rumblings of more accusations to come, maybe charges in the future? What are you hearing?
It definitely seems like one of those possibly career ending or career changing moments for Diddy, where it's like a groundswell against him, and that Cassie's allegations were, I mean, so public and shocking. And now he's got those two other lawsuits that, I mean, I haven't heard one way or the other about whether there will be more claims, but that always seems likely. And then how fast the Cassie's lawsuit settled too seemed interesting. I mean, we just don't know because neither camp is talking. But what was interesting to me was the stuff about a police investigation. And the final word from NYPD is that there's no investigation, and that somebody in their PIO's office was basically speaking out of turn and said there was an investigation when there wasn't. But that just seems like really suspicious. Like, if you were in Diddy's camp, wouldn't that make you really nervous that there's people within NYPD like talking about a police investigation? I mean, why would they even be? Why did somebody in the PIO's office get that impression? And somebody who works in prosecutions over in California, who doesn't know anything about the case, but was just speculating to me that one reason Diddy might have wanted to settle so fast is to squash any kind of criminal investigation that might stem from Cassie, if he could get some kind of settlement related to that. It just seems like there's so much swirling around with him that we haven't heard the last of it. I mean, definitely not with these lawsuits. And are we going to be hearing more about like a criminal investigation?
Do you feel like a rap Me Too movement could arise from this, or do you feel like it's coming down the pipeline? Because I feel like so far a rap Me Too movement hasn't quite happened in the way that people would hope.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because the rap industry is just so, I mean, it's just so the way it is. And even, the lyrics of female rappers and stuff, definitely kind of plays into to the culture, although reversing roles sometimes. That I'm not sure if you have the same kind of like, moral outrage or moral righteousness, like groundswell, that you do in other industries. But I also think that we could be seeing that eventually, that with the lawsuits that are now filed against, Diddy and some of the other record industry people, that maybe we are on track for that. And maybe women are in the industry are going to start kind of standing up if they see other women having success with these lawsuits, and not getting, shamed out of the industry.
Moving into Thug and the YSL trial. Like I said, it's been a strange ride.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts so far on what we're seeing, and where is this heading? Yeah, what are you seeing?
I remember just thinking about the case and thinking that it's never the kind of case that would be brought by like the LA County District Attorney's Office. Like, the gangs that they're worried about in LA are the gangs within the LA County Sheriff's Department. It's just a different politics in the LADA's office. And if you were going to see like a RICO case against alleged gang members, it would be a federal case. And to see it brought in state court like that is interesting. And then I was really amazed at the prosecutor's opening statement yesterday, and just kind of some of the stumbles that she made and how unprepared she was. And it's like, wow, this is going to be a big trial. And it's just such a big, sprawling case. I'm like, if you were a juror, like, how would you get your arms around this? And the opening statements that are happening now, I mean, when the trial ends, like, are the jurors even going to remember this? But I guess, I mean, opening statements are part of just kind of setting the tone for the trial, and kind of getting jurors to think about things a certain way as the witnesses start to come in. But it's such a sprawling case. And then I do just see it as being, I mean, a lot of people have just pointed out like kind of the racism of it and the attack on hip hop with the use of rap lyrics. But I also think the rap lyrics debate kind of misses the fact that actually is a little more common than we think. I mean, Tory Lanez's rap lyrics were used against him in his sentencing when the lyrics that he directed at Meghann in the shooting were read aloud in court. So there definitely is precedent for that. It just seems like this is what's happening in the YSL trial is like on a different level. They've got like 17 different sets of lyrics that they can use. So they're kind of setting it up, giving the defense a lot of room to poke holes and find different things.
Yeah, we saw a lot of the rap lyrics being used today. What were you seeing in terms of like how they were being used and how they were being executed? Did you feel that it was an effective strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good way for the prosecutor to introduce what will probably be a pretty dominant part of at least some witness testimony. But just the way she introduced them is, we didn't go hunting for the lyrics. We were hunting for the murders, and we found the lyrics that way. Of course, Young Thug's lawyer Brian Steele reversed that today and was going through lyrics and pointing out problems with it, and that they're just focusing on certain things. So I'm interested to see which witnesses actually they actually introduce the lyrics for, because if they're going to use it as evidence and like introduce printed out lyrics or something as an exhibit, it's not like they can just introduce it in opening. They can put it on the screen and talk about it, but to actually get it in trial as evidence, they're going to need to get it entered through a witness and like lay the foundation for it. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens.
What do you know about Thug based on your knowledge of in the space of a reporter? What do you kind of expect to happen next? How do you expect this to move forward?
I expect it to be kind of an ongoing cluster just from the way the court operates, but I do expect it to get perhaps kind of boring really fast, because they might have some experts up to talk about gunshot residue or something, but then who knows, maybe in a month Lil Wayne's going to testify. I'm kind of skeptical Lil Wayne's actually going to testify, but it could go like that. We could have like a week of boring expert testimony, and then there's a week of something pretty interesting because they're talking more specifically about the Donovan Thomas murder, which the whole case kind of seems to hinge around that and in another murder. So when they get into stuff like that, that could be interesting. And then some of the associates and gang associates testimony could be really interesting. I mean, the prosecutor seemed to kind of allude to the fact yesterday that she's basically worried about some of the witnesses. I mean, you just don't know how their testimony is going to come in and whether they recant on the stand or something. So I think we could be in for some dramatic moments like that. But with 400 witnesses and it going on for so many months, it's like, who has time to like babysit this entire trial? But luckily, Law and Crime Network and the reporters on the ground in Atlanta, I think, will be, so we can depend on them.
And another trial coming up, obviously, is the YNW Melly double murder charges, potentially the death penalty on the line. I noticed that you haven't quite touched on that trial as much. Do you have any feelings towards it? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I haven't watched that one as much, and that was one. I mean, Florida has such an open courts record and such a liberal policy for allowing cameras in courts that, I mean, part of the reason that is being the only reason that's being televised by Law and Crime is just it's Florida and they're allowing cameras in it. But I haven't seen it. It hasn't intrigued me as much legally as like the RICO trial against Young Thug does, because that's more of a subjective crime or a subjective case to prove. But I definitely am interested in following the Melly trial more when it starts. I think that did it get pushed to January?
I think it was February. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I'd like to follow that more. But I definitely also want to still be covering stuff in LA. I don't want to just become one of those people who just sits at my desk and covers whatever Law and Crime Network is streaming. So I definitely want to stay active in courts around LA and be covering stuff in person, like not always covering celebrity stuff, but covering big prosecutions in LA federal court and things like that. Like there was a big manslaughter case brought against a boat captain in a big maritime accident 4 years ago that killed like 34 people. So that was a really big case for the DOJ in LA. And part of my readership, especially my paid subscribers on my Substack, Legal Affairs and Trials.com, is LA attorneys who are interested in those kind of cases. So I'm kind of trying to find a way to balance coverage of both areas while still building up both YouTube and Substack.
Another case, I guess, just to kind of run through them all, is NBA YoungBoy's upcoming federal gun case. It was just recently found that the case is back on, the trial's back on. Do you have any thoughts on that, just right off the bat?
Yeah, that's another one that should be easy to track, at least until the actual trial starts, because you can just follow the filings online. But with no cameras in federal court, it's going to be pretty shut off. And I'm not sure. I mean, I don't really have a travel budget yet, but it is the kind of thing that, I'd like to eventually get to the point where, maybe I do travel around for trials like that. And especially federal court, I feel like I speak the language of federal court, and it's kind of universal for state to state. So cases like that would be great.
What has been, I guess, the most fulfilling case for you to cover so far?
Probably just the reaction that I got to covering Tory Lanez's trial. I mean, I just to have that many people appreciating my coverage and saying that they really learned a lot about the court system, I think is awesome. And then LA's specifically, there's some LA federal public corruption cases involving politicians and a big bribery scheme involving a city councilman who ran downtown that I've been able to cover, that I think a lot of people in LA have really appreciated the coverage on that. So anything that kind of teaches people about the court system and gets more people into it.
Are you getting any validation from the journalistic community now, more so than you were before?
Yeah, I do feel like I'm getting more attention from other journalists and invites for podcasts, and old college classmate who actually hosts the Wall Street Journal's podcast, The Journal, just reached out and asked if I can talk to their staff about my process for things, which is cool. So, and I did get an invite from the U of O School of Journalism, University of Oregon, where I graduated. Of course, they read the Washington Post profile, and they kind of try to ride the coattails of successful graduates. So yeah, I mean, I've always tried to maintain relationships with journalists at other papers, especially when I worked at the LA Daily Journal and was the Orange County reporter. I didn't work in the newsroom with the other reporters in LA. So the reporters in Orange County were kind of my colleagues, the reporters for the other papers who would cover the cases that I cover. So I'm good friends with a lot of people that I see in court, and I try not to see it as like a rivalry, but like the Law 360 reporters and I cover a lot of the same cases. So we talk a lot about like the things that we see in different angles and that kind of thing.
One more case I wanted to touch on before I let you go is a lesser case that I feel like a lot of people don't know about, which is FBG Duck's case. Have you heard any rumblings about where that case could be going?
Yeah, is that the case in Chicago right now? I just got a producer at CBS Chicago was asking me about that, but I guess it's Chicago State Court, and it's another gang case where rap lyrics are being used. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going on right now, but I need to brush up on that a little bit. I have not been following that one.
Cool. I guess in closing, how does it all feel? You know, you got the LA Times, Washington Post. You're kind of the woman of the hour right now, being covered as much as you have been. How does it all feel?
It's awesome. I mean, this is like what we work for, and we just want, you know, as journalists, we want people to read our work and pay attention to it and have impact. So if that's that brings people into my stories, then it's great. And you know, I love it. I love the compliments and the attention, and I just kind of want to keep giving people news and giving people things to read.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, for sure.